Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Hi, everybody. Okay, I'll tell you what, I didn't mention this in the last episode, and it slipped my mind. I should tell people, I think, how busy I am and how sort of, perceived milestones don't necessarily mean a ton to me. But the last episode, October 6th, was the 5-year anniversary of this show. I started this in my brother's house during 2020 in October, on October 6th. That was the very first evening that I decided to record anything. And leading up to this particular decision, I think, to have this show was a typical gradual one, I would say. I would categorize it like that. It wasn't necessarily easy, but it became easy. Again, back in 2018, I finished graduate school, and then 2019 rolled around, and I had finished, I believe, my last book at the time, which was Purposeful Deception, in 2018, previously, the year before. But I sat on that for about 6 months because, again, I was interested in looking for a higher ed job, and fortunately, it didn't work out, which was certainly to my benefit. And again, when 2019 rolled around and I started making some international speaking engagements, that's when I really saw the international problem and how this flat out could not be fixed. The business of education, the business of brainwashing, and how essentially, again, these individuals in these foreign countries, specifically in Canada and in Australia at the time, that they would be willing to fall for anything in mass, that the vast majority of their populace would fall for any kind of a lie that was presented to them on television as being real. And that scared the absolute hell out of me, to be honest, because I thought to myself, they don't stand a chance. Now, it's not going to be all of them, but it's going to be enough of them, and this isn't going to be a good thing. And then when 2020 rolled around, being well aware, even in 2019, believe it or not, having read a great deal of things online at the time, that a shot rollout in medical tyranny was right around the corner. Again, being well aware of this even in 2019. By the time the COVID lie hit in March of 2020, that's when I said, something's got to give here. Because these people are believing this. Again, these educational institutions, of course, were dropping like flies. And at that particular moment, I basically said, well, I'm done writing books at the very least, because I think there has to be another avenue in order to get some messages across and get them across a lot faster. With that said, I hadn't started this podcast until, of course, the fall of 2020, but that was when, even so, in the spring of 2020 and the summer of 2020, I was chronicling everything that was happening in chronological order in those Storm Series books that I wrote, which again are free on PDF on my website, AmericanEducationFM.com. And when I was doing that, it was when I was consistently being exposed to that and chronicling that, again, as a historic archive for people who were interested in what was really going on in 2020, certainly from a psychological operations standpoint. It wasn't until I started to homeschool my niece and nephew when I saw the way that their educators were behaving, educators, quote unquote, and the way that, of course, the entire system was being treated and just the embarrassing nature of everything, all of it. It made me sick to my stomach. And that's when I said, okay, look, I know in the past I've said that everybody and their dead grandmother has a podcast, so what's going to make this one any different? And then again, it was something that, of course, I learned a long time ago, certainly when I was in graduate school, which is, and even before then, which is you look for an area of need where one isn't being filled. There's clearly a need for something to be said in a particular avenue, but it's just not being said, and it's certainly not being said at a particular volume. And again, that's when I started to get on the internet and bounce around and look for so-called education podcasts, and I didn't see any. And at the time, Libs of TikTok was about it. And I even thought that she was kind of milquetoast at the time on specific issues, just a lot of complaining about, left-wing this, left-wing that. transgender this, transgender that in the education business, which of course is a terrible problem, but it's not the worst problem. There are worse problems. Pedophilia, for example, being one of them, but also again the mask wearing tyranny, and then the standing on the stickers and eating lunch by yourself and isolating students and locking them in a room by themselves because they cough or they sneeze once or twice. And then again, just the hyper reaction and normalization of child abuse. That's basically when I just said, okay, I've had enough. I can't consistently keep writing about this in books and then attempt to self-publish those books and get the message out fast enough. So that's when I said I've got to buy a microphone and start this show. And I did. And it started off with 6 listeners, and then it went to 12. And now we're over 1,000 5 years later, and I'll take it. That's enough for me. It doesn't have to get any bigger, doesn't have to get any smaller. And if it does in either direction, that's fine. So I'm not concerned with numbers. I'm not concerned with clicks. I'm just interested in continuously learning. And then again, sharing what I learn with other individuals. And if other individuals want to learn along with me, then great. But I certainly want to say this, that it's been an absolute honor to have this show, that I appreciate every single person who listens to this show, the people who comment on the show. And yeah, I just thoroughly enjoy it. And I hope that, you learn something as well. Again, it's one of the reasons I do this 3 days a week, and it was intentional, was because I wanted people to not only have time to listen to it regardless of the length of the particular episode, but to then look around their immediate environment and start to recognize the things that I see also. That the things that I bring up here on the show to give people an opportunity to reflect on their current surroundings, basically, and then just say, yeah, this is happening around where I live, or I heard this, or I heard that. Again, the number of stories that have been shared here on this show from listeners and guests and a number of other things has been incredibly educational and very eye-opening. And I would like for that to not stop. I would like for this to continue to go on here. And again, I just want to say thank you for listening and contributing. A great deal of you have contributed in your own ways. And I highly appreciate it. We're over 100 and whatever it is, 40 some odd Substack articles in on the americanclassroom.substack.com. I greatly appreciate it over there as well. Vanessa Hurst has written a couple of articles over there for me, and on her own, rather. Same thing with Cicely Hellickson and John Clement. They wrote articles again also over there, and you can check their work out over there as well. And it's greatly appreciated. Again, that's one of the other things I wanted to do, was create that Substack channel for other individuals, again, to have a voice and have a say as to what they see going on in the areas where they live, and give their 2 cents also, because it matters. It's more than 2 cents. It's priceless. It's valuable information. So again, just to thank everybody one more time, I really do appreciate it. And you know what we do here. We're constant students. We're constantly unlearning. We're constantly relearning. And that's the point. Whether that be geopolitical events, educational issues, or anything having to do with the corrupt medical industry, it's the exact same thing across the board. We're interested in exposing the corruption and then changing some minds and trying to get individuals again to remove themselves from as much of government as humanly possible, because everything that government touches turns to dust. So again, the more self-governed we are and the less we have to rely on the system, the better. At least that's my opinion, but there you go. Again, it's been a great deal of fun. The amount of reading that we've engaged in, again, throughout this show, and the conversations that we've had, and the audios that has been played, and the emails that you've shared with me that I've even read on the show in many cases, and again, to all of the guests who I've had on, I've learned a great deal from you, and hopefully it's right back at you in the exact same way. So, yeah, thanks again, and here's to 5 more years. Okay, let's kick this off, shall we? First of all, I've got another Substack article up. It's a short one, Psychological Operations Against Citizens. This is a 18-minute video with about half of it from Naomi Wolf many years ago, it appears. She's certainly younger than she is now. And in it, in the first half of this 18-minute video, again, you'll see her describing psychological operations from the media standpoint. And she openly says it straight up, that the Boston bombing, quote unquote, did not go down the way that people thought, that it was a production, that no one died. It was just, again, an event that was designed to terrorize people for a variety of reasons and motives and a number of other things, but that it's legal, of course, for the media to do this. And of course, we're seeing that with the Charlie Kirk event as well. And that particular story, as many are aware, is falling apart, just a little piece at a time. Again, the number of posts that I've even seen and even read here on the show having to do with individuals who actually lose a loved one, they're all commenting the same way when it comes to Charlie Kirk's so-called wife. They're all saying the same thing. They're even saying it when it comes to their parents or other close family members or siblings that they have lost even by so-called natural causes, let alone having someone's neck shot through on basically the internet with so-called many witnesses, even though that's not really what happened. And they're openly saying again, why is she taking to the television screen and smiling from ear to ear about the number of dollars that they're making from donations and growing their company? Is this exactly what a person would do if they had really lost a loved one? And of course, the answer is no. I've described it here on the show at length. These, individuals who lose a loved one are inconsolable. They don't want to go outside. Depression sets in. They behave differently. They're not interested in communicating with individuals because, again, they want to grieve in that way. Again, it's not natural to grieve that way, smiling from ear to ear, making millions of dollars, and then joking about how your business is growing and you're the head and now you're in charge and, your husband left you orders on what to do and how to run the company and blah, blah, blah. Nope, it was a psychological operation. And they happen consistently because they're allowed to happen. It's lawful. And until it becomes completely illegal, only then will one of two things happen. They will stop because it's illegal, or the individuals who engage in it and attempt to pass it off as being real will get caught. And then they'll have to go to jail. Because again, it's fraud. It's money laundering. It's embezzlement. You're gaining money by telling people one particular thing occurred and that you're going to use that money for said thing, and then you're turning right around and not using that money for said thing based on something that didn't happen in the first place. It's exhausting, but it's something that, again, occurs in our country, unfortunately. And a time is going to have to come when it stops. Now, with that said, there's also a bit of an odd admission. Again, during the Charlie Kirk thing, a lot of people were very concerned about data harvesting and the amount of personal information, of course, that was going to be gathered from people's cell phones if they found themselves in or around a Turning Point USA event. Well, as it turns out, that's exactly what happened. When individuals showed up to that so-called funeral, which was a WWE WrestleMania match, basically, admittedly so, Turning Point USA claims that they digitally tracked 277,000 Americans. And this was reported again by Redacted News and Clay Morris over there along with his wife. And that's rather damning because instantly all of those individuals, even people who weren't there, started getting Charlie Kirk TPUSA emails. A bit strange. The problem I have beyond that are all of the talking heads, though, who are on X specifically, and even Rumble and these other channels. And they're still trying to spin this yarn of Charlie Kirk is dead and who did it and why. Again, in my opinion, this is where you can find out that these individuals are compromised, or at the very least, they are given orders and told to follow them. Because again, I don't have orders. And I certainly don't take them from man. And I'm not following any particular orders either. I can just objectively look at a situation and then do the thing that I see as being the thing that needs to be said or the thing that needs to be done. Again, if you have individuals like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Ryan Matta, Stu Peters, whomever, and they're all basically saying the same kinds of things around the Charlie Kirk event or other events, then therein lies the problem. You again now have Candace Owens out there openly saying that there were Telegram threads back and forth of Charlie Kirk again not taking Jewish money and not taking money from Israeli donors, and then basically saying that he's going to walk away from supporting Israel blindly because he's not interested in the money and whatever else. I would say again that that's part of the psychological operation. It's designed to get individuals away from supporting Israel by highlighting the fact that they are not our greatest ally, that Netanyahu's not the good guy, and that they offer money to people to support them no matter what, and then censor their own fellow Americans at their expense, and then at the same time profit from it. See, this is part of the PSYOP also, and that's always going to be the case. But again, that's not really honing in on the real truth. It's a psychological operation, so it's not necessarily designed around the truth. But the truth of the matter is that he's not dead. That again, the entire thing was a setup for one reason or another. And I've brought them up on the show in the past. I'm not going to rehash the whole thing, but you get what I'm saying, I think. Again, if these individuals are not honed in on what is actually going on here, and they're just beating around the bush or trying to spin multiple yarns one particular way or another, or I don't know, rehash an old story or an old theory rather than getting down to the crux of the matter, that's their fault. And that should show people that even they are compromised. Again, Candace Owens is compromised. Alex Jones is compromised. All of these people are compromised for one way or another, or at the very least, they're controlled. It's just unnatural. So I'm going to leave it at that, but basically, again, that's kind of the tell, I think. The tell is that when these individuals start off all saying generally the same thing, and then their paths cross when it comes to their storytelling, and they end up again basically telling the same kinds of stories, but they just tell them at separate times, or their stories consistently change, therein lies the problem. What was it, 48 hours, 24 to 48 hours after it occurred? I mean, I was right here along with a lot of you and saying, yeah, this didn't happen. Not only did it not happen the way that it's being presented to us, but it just didn't happen, period. Because you can't shoot somebody in the neck with a 30-06 and have their neck be intact. There would be blood everywhere. There would be ballistic matter everywhere. There would be, again, human matter, autopsies, medical reports, photographs, the whole thing. I mean, they did it with Kennedy when he was killed. We had all of that footage. All of that evidence existed, but not with this. It's just a giant disappearing act. This is difficult for people to understand because they don't know the world that they live in. But once, again, a person sits and studies and thinks quietly and doesn't get over emotional about things and just does the actual homework and the investigations, then you can arrive again at logical conclusions as to the real world that we live in. And when that happens, then you start seeing things as they actually are, which is, again, deception for a variety of different reasons. It's not all for bad reasons, but unfortunately, there are a great deal of people who get tricked in the middle of all of this. So they're not going to stop, as I've said before. The psychological operations are ongoing. They're still ongoing. I think that this entire government shutdown thing is another psychological operation where other real things are taking place behind the scenes that we're not being told about or shown that are probably very, very beneficial to all of us. At the same time, there's a flip side of that coin, which is that, again, it's very concerning for a number of people, specifically individuals on the so-called right wing of things, if a person wants to think in that paradigm, that, again, this is helping usher in a digital ID or more digital banking, basically, and, things of that nature, that this is just kind of the slow roll of that as things are occurring behind the scenes away from sort of a watchful eye. But let me mention a few other things that have come out of this also, which again have been rather revealing, although not necessarily surprising. Just the other day, it was unclassified from the Federal Bureau of Investigation that, of course, James Comey and his FBI were spying on U.S. senators. That's always gone on. That's not a new thing. It's very common. It's been happening for, 100+ years, if not longer than that. Spying on senators goes back to the Roman Empire. So again, it's not new. It's just something, again, that sort of continues to add another layer to the actual true story of the FBI engaging in sedition, treason, and conspiracy to commit both. So you had Senator Mike Kelly, Lindsey Graham, Bill Hagerty, Josh Hawley, Dan Sullivan, Tommy Tuberville, Ron Johnson, of course, COVID, the whole COVID lie regarding him, and his mentioning of all of this and bringing all of that up. Cynthia Loomis and Marsha Blackburn were apparently on this list as well. So, again, this has to do with Operation Arctic Frost, election law matters, sensitive investigative matter cast. And that, again, was declassified. There's also been a great deal of discussion having to do with the Insurrection Act. And again, in my professional opinion, having read the Insurrection Act and even covered it on the show at length, certainly back then, and even now, I think that the Insurrection Act was signed back in January 6th of 2021, thereby, of course, making the entire Biden administration null and void. The military was in charge when he was not really in office because he wasn't really elected to the position. And the discussion of it now is not an accident either. That much like the Israeli narrative that is out there now, and of course all of that not being an accident either, with all of the, are they really the chosen people and all of that discussion, and even that discussion's happening widely on YouTube, I might add, but from some rather large accounts and rather large names, which again, I don't think that they're large by accident either. I think that they're placed there on purpose. I digress, but the Insurrection Act stuff, I personally think that this is being unrolled now for the public to basically digest it slowly. Because when emergency powers are put in place by the President of the United States, there's a great deal that he can do. He can take over particular elected officials' positions, in particular, of course, if they are obstructing justice. And who's to say? I mean, many of these individuals are sort of openly admitting this. Brandon Johnson in Chicago, for example, he's one of many. You have Gavin Newsom out there in California, that's typical. J.B. Pritzker in Illinois, same thing. Kathy Hochul, I mean, the list goes on. And he's openly said, Donald Trump has, that if this Mamdani guy, or however the hell you say his name, the communist running for mayor of New York, that if he were to win in some way and basically do the things that he claims he's going to do, then Donald Trump's DOJ is going to arrest him. That just because you're an elected official doesn't mean you have immunity from anything, because you don't. So again, this is going to get interesting, but let me read this very quickly. This again has to do with the Insurrection Act specifically and the organization and general military powers. At the top of this document, 10 U.S.C. United States Code 2024 edition, Title 10, Armed Forces. Subtitle A, it says, General Military Law, Part 1, Organization and General Military Powers. Chapter 13, Insurrection. Section 253, Interference with State and Federal Law. From the United States Government Publishing Office, or GPO.gov. This is subsection 253, Interference with State and Federal Law. It says, quote, the President, by using the militia, or the armed forces, or both, or by any other means, shall take such measures as he considers necessary to suppress in a state any insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination, or conspiracy, if it, number one, so hinders the execution of the laws of that state and of the United States within the state, that any part or class of its people is deprived of a right, privilege, immunity, or protection named in the Constitution and secured by law, and the Constitution authorities of that state are unable, fail, or refuse to protect that right, privilege, or immunity, or to give that protection. And then it says, or, number 2, oppose or obstructs the execution of the laws of the United States or impedes the course of justice under those laws. And then it wraps up and says, in any situation covered by Clause 1, the state shall be considered to have denied the equal protection of the laws secured by the Constitution, unquote. Translation, if you get in the way, you will be detained, which is not a bad thing. This includes judges also, and I think that needs to be mentioned too, that if judges obstruct and openly get in the way of the natural proceedings of federal law, or they, provide their false interpretation of one thing over another as a result of being politically motivated or, I hate Donald Trump and all that other stuff, those individuals can be detained and removed as well. In fact, it's already happened. There have already been judges who have been removed and military judges have been put in their place. Specifically, again, regarding immigration. Case in point, this is livenowfox.com. This is from October 4th. It was titled, Trump Replaces Fired Immigration Judges with Military Lawyers. It says the Trump administration is assigning military lawyers as temporary immigration judges after firing dozens from the bench. About 100 Army Reserve lawyers will begin 6-month assignments to ease a 3.4 million case backlog. Experts warn that the move risks undermining both immigration courts and military justice. Well, it doesn't. This is what happens again when you've signed the Insurrection Act back in 2021. Everybody has the goods on all the people who have engaged in illegality, and now, when justice is about to be served, you have individuals again slow-rolling said justice because they don't want it to happen. So you replace those people. Again, it says training for the first group of Army lawyers begins Monday, this past Monday, and training for the second group is expected to start in the spring of 2026. Several former and current military reserve lawyers said they were told. Roughly 100 Army Reserve lawyers are expected to participate, with 50 beginning a nearly 6-month assignment immediately after their training, according to a September 3rd email sent to an Army Reserve attorney and reviewed by the Associated Press. The administration wants to bring in as many as 600 military-trained attorneys to help make decisions about which immigrants can stay in the country. Advocates are alarmed by the move to use military lawyers to bolster staffing in a backlogged immigration court as President Donald Trump's administration ramps up immigration arrests. Those courts have year-long waits for hearings, and the number of pending cases has more than doubled in the past 4 years to 3.4 million. It goes on, it says both the Army and National Guard said that they hope to fill the assignments with volunteers. Quote, the assignment provides the opportunity to gain judicial experience in a high-tempo, nationally significant setting. An email sent to members of the Army's Reserve Legal Command stated, adding the locations and other details will be released later. A notification seeking volunteers sent September 6th to active duty and reserve National Guard members said, quote, ideal candidates will possess experience in administrative law, immigration law, service as a military judge, or a related field. Applicants should have sound judgment, impartiality, and a suitable temperament for the role, it said. The Defense Department did not return an email seeking comment. The Executive Office for Immigration Review, which runs the immigration courts, declined to comment. And in the rule, the agency wrote that many successful immigration judges had little experience in immigration law before taking the job. And it goes on a little bit more, but you get the gist of it. Point is military is the only way. And we've been told that in endless Q drops. Military is the only way. Because the radicals, again, communists, Marxists, socialists, whatever you want to call them, they're all basically of the exact same ilk. Certainly Karl Marx socialism and Bolshevistic socialism specifically, that these people are deeply entrenched throughout our entire country, which is exactly why the Insurrection Act, in my opinion, was signed back in 2021, specifically January 6th, because they had the goods on who was allowing that entire thing to take place the way that it took place with Antifa. That was Nancy Pelosi, that was Democrats, that was Adam Schiff, that was a number of individuals, including the feds. And they were dumb enough to do it all while Donald Trump was still the president of the United States. They didn't think what? That he knew anything about the Insurrection Act? These people don't understand that the military's been in charge of our government for quite some time. Again, if a person goes back and you look at everything that's happened, of course, since 2016, even 2015, it's out of the ordinary, but in a good way. Again, a lot of moves have been made here, too many to even bring up, but there's more at play here. I think that's kind of the takeaway from a lot of this. There is this also, again, it's interesting and kind of in the same mainstream, a little highly suspicious, but it could be another pump fake again. This was from Disclosed TV. It was titled, U.S. Commission on Civil Rights Opens Sweeping Investigation into Anti-Semitism. Old anti strikes again. Again, it's basically the same old stuff that they've brought up in the past before. 1957 Civil Rights Act, which of course is beyond hypocritical because, again, people have the right to say what they'd like to say. Now, they don't have the right to say that they want to kill a bunch of people, but even so, they still have freedom of speech. And a lot of this, again, is directed towards college campuses and a number of other institutions and whatever else. But again, at the end of the day, people have the right to say what they want to say. If they disagree with a group of people or a race of people, they get to do that if they want to. That's the country we live in. So, again, it'll just be interesting to see how this all shakes out. Again, I certainly don't like the provisions that exist in probably half of the states in the United States, or just over half, that basically make it illegal to boycott anything having to do with Israel. If I was a betting man, I would say that in the future, those laws are going to be reversed in many states because, again, they're not our greatest ally, and certainly their government is not either. And the more people that figure this out, the louder they get. And that's what they're trying to stomp out right now. So again, I think that a great deal of individuals fully understand that it's unconstitutional, to say the least. And we still have rights in this country, whether people enjoy that or not. So, yeah, it's complicated. I'll put it that way. But saving Israel for last, again, they're taking a beating right now. And I think that that is on full display for everybody to see, and that's not a bad thing either. Now, sliding into education, here is a particular video that I want to play here. It's about 7 minutes long, and I found this on X, and it's of a gal discussing an Atlantic article from last November, 1 year ago, and it was specifically titled, The Elite College Students Who Can't Read Books. To read a book in college, it helps to have read a book in high school by a Ron Horowitz, or Horowitz. Yeah, give her a listen here because she's, again, 100% right when it comes to what's going on at the college level. And of course, I noticed this when I was in college in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was very few actual books, and it was packets or sections of books that they were having people read. And now it's getting down to the point where, again, they're not even offering books anymore. Again, this is the deliberate dumbing down of education and the deliberate dumbing down of the citizenry of America. Give her a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Closely related to this study is this article from The Atlantic. The author spoke to a number of university professors and several students and found that professors have had to adjust their expectations of their students. English lit majors can no longer be expected to read whole assigned books, but have to content themselves with assigned passages of books. Several of these college students, these young adults, have arrived on campus unaware that reading whole books would be required of them. Several told their teachers that they didn't know how to read a whole book. Let that sink in for a moment. I want you to remember that one, okay? In order to read a book, logic tells you that you read one word after another until there are no more words. Bam. You've read a book. But these students seem to think that reading a whole book is some special knowledge that they never received, a specific procedure that no one taught them. Remember that as we continue on here. So, we've probably pretty well established that literacy, as you and I and the PIAAC understand it, is so far in the toilet that it might not be salvageable in a single generation. Now, what about this elusive thing that came in to replace it, this critical literacy? This teaching manual for whole language from 1996 reads like one of those bizarre, esoteric, yet highly specific occult self-help manuals. It talks about the social aspect of language and other similarly Orwellian hot words instead of actually learning how to figure out what the words on the page say. One of the beginning strategies for teaching literacy with whole language, according to this manual, is the use of generative themes. Remember that one? Which all boils down to the most important thing about reading is learning the correct way to interpret a text, which, by the way, has nothing to do with the author's intent and is heavily reliant on your feelings. I mean, think about how so many people these days latch onto specific words and then spin out because those words trigger them in some way. That's because those words are generative words, which fit into generative themes, which are taught to them in a way specifically intended to trigger their emotional analysis. These people can't listen to reason at that point. They see the word and the programmed reaction is triggered, and that's it. That's what critical literacy produces, specifically and intentionally. As is evident in their own proudly stated definitions, the entire function of critical literacy is to teach children not how to read texts, but how to analyze them, or more precisely, how to analyze them correctly. That's an incredibly important distinction. Most children are taught to analyze texts before they're even taught how to spell words. Many children are never taught to spell words, they're just taught to analyze them. This concept, critical literacy, was the ultimate, final, ugly goal of a very long, arduous war that was waged specifically on phonics. Although, of course, phonics was only one battlefield in that war. The whole debate between phonics-based reading education and so-called whole language, which was the first form and forefather of critical literacy, is an ongoing, unresolved matter in the education community, sometimes called the reading wars. There is a lot of research that insists it makes no difference how you go about teaching kids to read. There is a lot of research pointing out that there is a marked superiority in reading comprehension and a whole host of other literacy skills when a child is taught using phonics. One of the many lines of debate in all this is whether or not children are born with a kind of latent ability to read and it merely needs to be activated. There's a ton of argument on both sides. In my opinion, this entire ridiculous, meaningless debate muddies the issue for the larger question. That is, what is the best way to teach good reading ability and habits to the average child? I say average because, of course, there will be outliers and there will be children who have difficulties and different methods or even completely unique methods will have to be employed for them. But the bottom line is that according to the data, on average, phonics is best. Always has been, always will be. When I was a kid, everyone, even the teachers, knew phonics was better, but they had to do as they were told. I mean, I'm sure you already know, but schools don't get the government handout if they don't use the government-approved curriculum, and that includes a lot of private schools. I mention government-approved curriculum because the state-mandated education system we have now is a recent invention, and again, not really the focus of this video. It's worth noting, however, that in the early days, it was billionaire industrialists who bankrolled the entire concept of a federal education board. Previously, the idea that the state should have any control over the education of children was unimaginable. As I said before, this isn't the focus of this video, but it is an interesting aspect, especially given the fact that there is a startling amount of scholarship out there to support the claims made by some that the removal of phonics in public state-run schools actually intended to decrease or at least limit literacy. Or, as we're perhaps seeing today, transform literacy into this other thing, this critical literacy. It's open knowledge that John Dewey, the guy who built the modern American education system, believed that education should be focused not on education, but on deliberate, calculated social formation. According to this book, which is stuffed with primary sources, the move away from phonics was intended to cut down on a person's ability to think critically and instead conform to, groupthink. Or, as we saw in the previous definition of critical literacy, becoming conscious of one's experience as historically constructed within specific power relations and moving the reader's focus away from the self. Here's the thing. And this isn't some tin hat conspiracy theory. This is a known fact that you can read about from the pens of the instigators themselves. The modern education system was not designed to teach children. When you pack up your kid with his little book bag and his lunchbox and you drop him off at school, he's not going to actually learn anything, except as a side dish to the primary function of education. Sure, he might be able to multiply, and if he's really bright, he might even be able to do long division and maybe even memorize all the state capitals, and they'll probably make damn sure he knows how to put a condom on a banana, but learning to read? This is a tad off topic, but I want to make this clear. When the education system in America was established and formed, it was done in an effort to socially condition children. The establishers and formers said so themselves on numerous occasions. To them, this was important. Children needed to be taught what to think. They needed to have their opinions formed very carefully. This is explicitly stated in many sources. But when they were doing this establishing and forming, one of the first things they did was throw out memorizing the alphabet and learning phonics. Why they chose to do this is something I'll leave to your own deductive reasoning. A few of the sources I have available also draw their own fairly obvious conclusions. Do your own reading. The answer is there.
Okay, first of all, full disclosure. Nothing turns me on like a pretty redhead talking about phonics. I'm not kidding. I want to reproduce with that woman big time. With that said, jokingly aside, although only half-heartedly, you heard her say it. Phonics is best. Taking it away is deliberate. It's designed to get people to conform. Thanks for nothing, John Dewey, you humanist piece of shit. On top of that, let me give you a perfect example as to why that's the case. Very recent case here in the town where I live. Not shocking because, well, it's faggotry, ladies and gentlemen. That's what they're trying to get children to conform to is faggotry. Not learning how to read and write, comprehend, and spell. No, not that. It's about social behaviors, many of which, of course, are degenerate. This was on Facebook shared with me the other day, and it says the following. Shared from a concerned parent with approval, quote, an incident occurred this weekend that we wanted to share. My daughter, a third grader, in Miss Smith's class in Marshall Elementary, informed us that she has been reading a book titled Drama, quote unquote, by a Raina, Telgemer. Don't care. Anyway, goes on. It says, as she described the book, she mentioned a scene depicting two males kissing. Because, of course, why not? My husband and I were immediately concerned for many reasons. We were unaware that such books were being offered to Talawanda Elementary students, and we were surprised that our child had been exposed to this content. Upon researching the book, we discovered that it's an LGBTQ-themed book. Not shocking. We also learned that the author, this Raina gal, has openly discussed her experiences with mental illness, including anxiety, panic disorder, and apparently what's called emetophobia, which is an extreme fear of vomiting. Good Lord. What is wrong with these people? Let's see. It goes on. It says this book has been banned and challenged in multiple school districts across the country. It has been on the American Library Association ALA list of frequently challenged and banned books due to its inclusion of LGBTQ content and characters in a middle school setting. It goes on. It says Ohio House Bill 8, the bill requires schools to consult with parents before teaching sexuality content. It bans sexuality content from students in kindergarten through third grade. Somebody broke the law. It commands teachers and faculty to reveal the student's mental, emotional, or physical health or well-being to parents, including outing students if they express identifying as a different gender than their assigned sex at birth. Number 2, it says, Executive Order 14190, titled Ending Radical Indoctrination in K12 Schooling. Was signed by President Donald Trump on January 29, 2025. The order is aimed at restricting certain educational content and practices in K-12 schools by directing federal agencies to eliminate funding for programs based on gender ideology, quote-unquote, and discriminatory equity ideology, quote-unquote. My husband and I met with Principal Stephanie Jones this morning regarding the book. She initially stated she was unaware of the LGBTQ books, but called us this afternoon to apologize for our child's exposure to the content. She offered counseling or a social worker to discuss the situation with our daughter. Is that really the logical response that you're supposed to have in a situation like this, or do you just burn the book? You see, what you do is you do what's called a classroom audit of books and literature, and then you do a library audit of books and literature, and you learn what the law is by reading a paragraph. Remember, the woman just told us that they can't read, which means, again, who's doing the educating? People who can't read a paragraph of the law? It goes on here. It says, she also informed that the middle school and high schoolers require permission slips to be signed before they are exposed to this kind of reading material. So an elementary school principal is aware of that regulation and stipulation for middle schools and high schools, but she thinks what about this? How about you reprimand the teacher who was using the book because they were violating the law? How about you place them on administrative leave for a moment? Allow them to cool their jets a little bit. It goes on, it says, however, Principal Jones also informed us that the books will not be removed from the shelves. She stated that these books are available in teacher classroom libraries and the main libraries of all 3 elementary schools, Bogan, Marshall, and Kramer. Sounds like some school districts violating Ohio state law. Interesting. While she confirmed these books are not a part of the curriculum, she noted that they are offered for free reading during silent reading times, which we believe still promotes and supports the content. Of course it does. Despite multiple requests, Principal Jones will not remove the books. We need your help, parents. We intend to bring this matter to the school board, and we are seeking support from other parents. We have contacted Diane Mullins from the Republican Party and are scheduled to speak with her on Wednesday. Any guidance or assistance you could provide in this situation would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for all your help and guidance in keeping our kids safe, unquote. And then they have images from the book itself. Let's see. Where 2 dudes are talking to each other, or, I'm sorry, 1 gal with purple hair, apparently. I don't know. You can't tell these days. When you say he's cute, do you mean it? Like, yeah, I think boys, yeah, another boy says, and then they go on with this gay conversation that no one gives a damn about. Again, I'm rubbing my face now. This is daily. This is daily. It's daily. In schools all across America. You have building administrators who don't read the law, don't follow the law. You have school teachers who don't read the law, don't follow the law. And then you have individuals willfully and knowingly breaking it and seemingly get away with it. And then when it's brought to their attention, they double down on their stupidity. I want Talawanda to get this through their stupid skulls. Get this phrase in your skull. Here it comes. Loss of federal funding. Let that sink in for a minute. What that will mean for even the employees and everyone's salaries. Loss of federal funding. It's coming, and you don't know it. Here's another way that you clean this out. They're called library audits. The American Library Association has zero pull in American schools, unless, of course, school boards decide to adopt them and adopt what they believe to be good books. But as I've been over here on the show, all of the leadership and all of the times it's changed hands at the American Library Association, they are full-blown communists. Card carrying. Proud of it, too. They do not care. Again, these were the books that Adolf Hitler burned. These books, ladies and gentlemen, they don't teach that in school because they don't want you to know that. These were the books that were burned. Not a bad thing. Now, on top of that, again, the ALA, like I said, has no pull. The fact is a school board can instantly make a vote in a school board meeting to do a classroom and library audit and remove any and all books that have any and all themes even remotely related to like the one that I just described there. They get to do that. Teachers' unions will be gay and push back because they typically are, and that's what they do. And at the exact same time, all of the demons will come out of the woodwork and start screaming and shouting and be so dumb as to expose themselves that they believe that these kinds of books should exist. Certainly here in the state of Ohio, it's actually against the law now. They're not supposed to exist at all. That's not true, Sean, you're lying. Look it up. But see, they don't. And they don't know where to look it up. And they don't know how to look it up. And what tools to use to look up the law. They just don't do it. They operate on emotion. I feel like this is important. I feel like everybody needs to read this. Children need to be exposed to different things and blah, blah, blah. Teach them how to read. That's why you will never find any copy of the McGuffey Readers in an elementary school classroom in today's day and age, because it will teach them to read all of them in less than 2 weeks. They will be reading, writing, comprehending, spelling in less than 2 weeks. But not if they're being exposed to gay books and even demonic books. I have it on pretty good authority that there are books being shared with elementary school students in the same school that talk about demons. I don't know in what context, but it wouldn't surprise me. Case in point, this next story from the Western Journal titled, it's a commentary, Demonic Compulsion. School ran weekly witchcraft address, shut it down once they couldn't force it on Christians anymore. I mean, I don't think that this requires much of an explanation. It's pretty much par for the course these days. But this is, again, one of the many things that they do in these environments. And they will get away with them as long as people don't catch them. They'll try to hide it. But this is the cool part about Jesus, too, is he talks through children, specifically. And he talks to honest children, who he knows who have honest parents. And then those individuals go home, and then they share this at home, and then boom, bam, before you know it, it's all over social media. People are writing stories about it. And then there's confrontations at school board meetings, and rightfully so. Again, library audits can exist. You can do it. The American Library Association does not hold the key, and they are not the arbiter of every single book that exists within a school district. They just aren't. They aren't. It's not the way that it works. Well, the ALA says this, so we have to do it. No, you don't. That's not the way that it operates. Anybody dumb enough to believe that, again, can't read. They can't look up policy. School districts make policy. If school districts want to do an audit, they make a vote. You have the majority, hopefully, on a school board. And then just like that, school board members can even have the right to go through the school district, book by book. And then, of course, the school board has the responsibility to tell the superintendent what to do, because the superintendent works for a school board. It's not the other way around. We want you to do this, superintendent. Go into every single school building, tell every single one of your administrators to pull out all of these books. Do it right now. And I want them in a bin outside of the front of that building at the end of the day. Today, one day. Period. With a memo that goes out to all of the teachers. If you read any of these books to these children, you will be placed on paid administrative leave. An investigation will take place, and if you violate this particular school board motion and this vote and this pass now policy, you will be relieved of your duty for insubordination. This is not hard. This is very easy. I'm telling you what, it isn't going to get better. It just won't. These degenerates will dig in like ticks because they don't read the law, which means loss of federal funding. One final note, also in the exact same wavelength here, unfortunately. This was from the Daily Mail. It was titled, High School Music Teacher Charged with Sexually Assaulting Teen Student. That doesn't happen in schools, said no one with a brain. A married music teacher has been accused of raping a 16-year-old girl, multiple times at a high school in New Jersey. William Arnold, the director of theater and vocal music at, I believe, Pequannock Township High School in Wayne, New Jersey, faces multiple charges after he was accused of abusing a student. An investigation was launched by the police department there in Morris County and their prosecutor's office based on accusations of inappropriate behavior reported by another teacher, according to the New York Post. 53-year-old married father of 3 allegedly began assaulting the girl over the last year, according to the Morris County prosecutor's office. Wait a minute. You mean a married male to a woman who has children sexually assaults a minor? That happens in schools? Weird. On September 29th, Arnold was charged with first-degree aggravated sexual assault, fourth-degree criminal sexual contact, and second-degree counts of sexual assault endangering the welfare of a child, and official misconduct. The teacher allegedly assaulted the girl from when she was aged 15 to 16, said Morris County Prosecutor Robert Carroll, according to New Jersey 101.5. The school superintendent, Michael Portis, said in a letter to the school community, wait for it, you know what's coming. Please be assured that we are taking every step possible to protect your children, our staff, and our school community. If needed, our guidance counselors are available to all our students and families. The district has worked with the police investigators. That was the unquote, by the way. Remember, safety and security is our number one concern. District has worked with the police investigation, and Arnold has been placed on administrative leave, according to school administrators. The end. Well, almost the end. My apologies. The guy likes taking selfies. Also highly suspicious. And he's got all the rainbow colors and bracelets on his wrist. So, he can't be taken seriously. Arnold is currently incarcerated at the Morris County Correctional Facility, according to the New York Post. Before his arrest, the New Jerseyan had just co-directed a musical rendition of The Wedding Singer, which included a mixed cast of adults and high school alums. Arnold is the 18th school staff member since 2024 to be accused of sexual misconduct, according to the outlet. That's called a pattern. The predators are a mix of teachers, coaches, and school staff who have committed various sexual crimes. A theater teacher in Virginia was convicted of secretly recording his students and a nanny. In 2021, Raphael Skolinski, or something like that, was sentenced to 4 years and 2 months after his live-in nanny told police she found a camera in an air vent in her room, according to NBC Washington. Police launched an investigation and uncovered over 30 recording devices and child pornography. Many of the videos featured girls from Herndon High School, where Skolowski was a teacher. Cops found over 8,000 videos on the former teacher's device. After he was released, he will register as a sex offender and is not permitted to have supervised contact with children aside from his own, unquote. There's a pattern here, ladies and gentlemen, and it's only going to get larger and more frequent. Two final jab-related things, and who knows, maybe this first one ties into the previous stories. This had to do specifically, again, it was directly linked underneath Jordan Peterson's daughter talking about his neurological conditions and or other ailments, which of course are not just brought on by potential mold, but certainly the COVID biological weapons that he took. This was a particular research article from the National Library of Medicine out of PubMed, and it was titled, "A Potential Role of the Spike Protein in Neurodegenerative Diseases, a Narrative Review." This was published, February of 2023. Here's the abstract very quickly. If I've read this before on the show, I apologize. They're all sort of blending together like Jell-O at this point. But here's what it says, quote, "Human prion protein and prion-like protein misfolding are widely recognized as playing a causal role in many neurodegenerative diseases. Based on the vitro and in vitro experimental evidence related to prion and prion-like disease, we extrapolate from the compelling evidence that the spike glycoprotein of SARS-CoV-2 contains extended amino acid sequences characteristic of a prion-like protein to interfere its potential to cause neurodegenerative disease. We propose that vaccine-induced spike protein synthesis can facilitate the accumulation of toxic prion-like fibrils in neurons. We outline various pathways through which these proteins could be expected to distribute throughout the body. We review both cellular pathologies and the expression of disease that could become more frequent in those who have undergone mRNA vaccination. Specifically, we describe the spike protein's contributions via its prion-like properties to neuroinflammation and neurodegenerative diseases, to clotting disorders within the vascular system, so to speak, vasculature, there we go, to further disease risk due to suppressed prion protein regulation in the context of widely prevalent insulin resistance, and to other health complications. We explain that these prion-like characteristics are more relevant to vaccine-related mRNA-induced spike proteins than natural infection with SARS-CoV-2. Translation, it's the shots because COVID doesn't exist. It wraps up, and it says, we note with an optimism of apparent loss of prion-like properties among the current Omicron variants, that's funny. We acknowledge that the chain of pathological events described throughout this paper is only hypothetical and not yet verified. We also acknowledge that the evidence we usher in, while grounded in the research literature, is currently largely circumstantial, not direct. Finally, we describe that the implications of our finding for the general public, and we briefly discuss public health recommendations we feel need urgent consideration. It was originally published in 2022, got published again in 2023, and now it's almost 2026. And I think it's safe to say that the cat is out of the bag. The die has been cast and the jury is in. That this has been proven time and time again. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, I have family members who are experiencing this who are jabbed. This is happening. And on a final note, and again, this is where the humble pie comes in, and this is where the crow gets eaten, but it's also where people like me, I've got to do it. Again, I've had the show now for 5 years. 5 years this week. I have to bring this up. This is the I told you so moment. These I told you so moments, again, are going to get more and more frequent. And you know what I'm talking about, but here it is too. This has to do with employers. This was from Children's Health Defense, The Defender, on October 6th, titled Exclusive, OSHA Admits It Told Healthcare Employers Not to Report COVID Vaccine Injuries. Seems like an OSHA violation. Seems like an American Medical Association civil rights violation, among other violations. It says, after a whistleblower alerted the defender, an OSHA spokesperson confirmed an internal directive telling healthcare employers not to report or track COVID-19 vaccine injuries. OSHA removed the policy from its website after inquiries from the defender. Critics said the directive concealed the scope of vaccine injuries and made it difficult for injured workers to obtain workers' compensation or disability benefits. Again, when I hear people say that your working environment, in particular when you work in government, that we're all a family and we're all in this together, we all care about each other. Horse shit. No, you don't. Because when one needs help, everybody else turns their back, and the system and the employer themselves and the conglomerates and the corporations, they all turn their back. Take these poisons for which you know nothing about them. You don't know any of the ingredients. Do this or else you'll lose your job. And oh, by the way, we're not going to tell you this right out of the gate, but when you get sick, if you get sick from these shots, you're going to lose your job also, and you're not going to receive any benefits of any kind. And then we're going to hide the number of people who are ill as a result of the very thing that we made you take in the first place, or that we told you you had to take. I'm going to read a few portions of this here. It says the following. The federal agency that oversees workplace safety exempted healthcare employees from reporting workers' adverse reactions to mandated COVID-19 vaccines, according to a healthcare industry whistleblower who alerted the defender. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, issued the directive on June 28th of 2021 to encourage vaccination during the COVID-19 pandemic. The directive also stated that OSHA, a division of the U.S. Department of Labor, would not track workers' COVID-19 vaccine adverse events, even though it acknowledged that the vaccines may cause injuries and would require employees to take time off work. It even said so in the forms that they would sign. You might get sick and you might have to stay home after taking this. It doesn't raise any suspicions for anybody. OSHA continued, it said, to track reactions to other vaccines. A Labor Department official confirmed for the defender that OSHA didn't track COVID-19 vaccine injuries and said those policies remained in place until February of this year, 2025. OSHA also outlined its COVID-19 reporting policy on its website's Frequently Asked Questions page for COVID-19, which stated the following, quote, OSHA does not wish to have any appearance of discouraging workers from receiving COVID-19 vaccination, and also does not wish to disincentivize employers' vaccination efforts. Passive-aggressive. Isn't that nice? As a result, they said, OSHA does not intend to enforce recording requirements to require any employers to record worker side effects from COVID-19 vaccination. These snakes, I will tell you what, just disgusting. It says the policy was removed from the website after the defender contacted OSHA earlier this month. However, it is visible on an archived version of the webpage from September 1st under the heading vaccine-related, quote-unquote. And then it gives testimony of multiple doctors and how they know that OSHA is just complete garbage. And then it goes on and on and on. I'm going to read this last part real quick. A Dr. Mary Talley Bowden, an ear, nose, and throat specialist, said, quote, OSHA's directive to employers to ignore suspected injuries from the COVID-19 shots contradicts the CDC's rules requiring providers to report most COVID-19 shot reactions to VAERS. VAERS is the U.S. government-run vaccine adverse event reporting system. She went on and said that she was not surprised, as none of her COVID-19 vaccine-injured patients, quote, were reported to VAERS by other providers, much less OSHA. Smith said that providers at the hospital where she worked during the COVID-19 pandemic, quote unquote, there was no pandemic, were unanimously in denial that any new conditions presenting after COVID-19 vaccination were adverse events related to the vaccine. Instead, they documented it, and it was just called COVID-19 symptoms. She added, quote, "It was an officially supported and established trend during the pandemic to deny any causative relationship between new onset medical condition and COVID-19 vaccination. No ICD-10 code existed specifically for reporting adverse events, injuries, and death from COVID-19 vaccines. This had the effect of obscuring and hiding safety signals and data from the public." Unquote. Corruption. Coercion, corruption, coercion, corruption. Implementation, death, reaction. On a loop, just repeating over and over again. Cover up, cover up, cover up. I'm telling you, we told people this was going to happen. When everybody's thinking alike, someone's not thinking. When everybody's on the same page and everybody says, do this, you don't say, how often? Where can I get more? Those aren't the questions you ask. The questions you ask are, why is this happening? Why are you doing this? Who's telling you to do this? Who's telling them to tell you about this? Think of, again, the death toll is astounding. The chronic illness toll is astounding. The repeated deterioration is astounding. Deion Sanders, again, to bring him up yet again, he was at a press conference after a game or after a practice, and out of nowhere, very recently, I just saw it the other day, he openly said, the reason I'm in the mood that I'm in is because I think I'm clotting again. He goes, my legs hurt, my body hurts, I'm not getting the blood flow I need, I'm clotting again, so just wanted to get that out there and get that on the record because that's how I'm feeling right now. Yes, his body's eating itself because he's ruined his DNA and his RNA with the shots, with poison, because that's what happens with any kind of poison. He could be a heroin addict. He's not. But again, heroin addicts experience the exact same thing. Crack addicts experience the exact same thing. It's poison, and it's that simple. You poison yourself frequently, your body starts to do things to compensate because, of course, you're deteriorating the makeup of your body. Autoimmune conditions, regardless of how mild, all the way to staring at a wall because you don't know where you are and what you're doing. Neurodegenerative diseases out the wazoo. You may recall that those 9+ pages, give or take, which are on my website under the medical documents tab, you're welcome to take a look, that were court-ordered and released by Pfizer that showed all of the side effects affiliated with the shots, side effects / intentionals, but the first 5 all had to do with the brain. It all had to do with cognitive ability. I mean, right out of the gate, they were telling you, this is going to go right past the blood-brain barrier and impact your brain and your central nervous system, because that's the system of the body that runs every other system. This is going to continue. This will continue. I will continue to bring up these stories because they have to continue to be brought up. This is important. And until more and more people wake up to this, and more people are told publicly that this is why they are experiencing what they are experiencing, I'm telling you, people will continue to make horrible decisions. And I should mention this, if they find out, like a Kirk Herbstreit of the world or a Deion Sanders or what have you, that this was brought on by vaccination via COVID shots, quote unquote, bioweapons, that if they find that out and they stay quiet, then they are showing you their true colors. Because as the meme says, how people behaved and reacted during the COVID lie, that's who they are. They will bend the knee. They will go along to get along. They don't want to, cause any problems. Instead of actually doing the research and bringing factual information to the people around them, whether that be their bosses, their coworkers, their family, their friends, what have you, and then share that information with them with the purpose of saving their lives and helping them. Knowledge is power, after all. The more of it you have, the more of it you have. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening as always. I greatly appreciate it, and I'll catch you on Friday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.